My wife's boyfriend had no idea I owned the condo they lived in, and dialed the police like I was nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I stood there calmly while flashing lights filled the hallway. Because the moment authority arrived, one truth was about to surface, and once it did, every plan made behind my back was going to collapse in a way nobody saw coming. Before I tell the full story, do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment saying where you're watching from. It helps this story reach the people who need to hear it. Now let me tell you how everything started. The condo smelled different that night. Not like home. More like cheap cologne layered over a candle meant to hide something rotten. I stood outside the door for a full 10 seconds before knocking, palm flat against what I paid for, heartbeat steady in a way that surprised even me. A year earlier, that door opened with a smile and a joke about dinner being almost ready. That night, it opened with irritation. My wife didn't answer. The boyfriend did. The boyfriend looked me up and down like I was something tracked in on a shoe. Gym shorts, designer hoodie, confidence borrowed from a life that wasn't earned. The first words out of that mouth weren't hello. You lost, man? I said the condo address out loud, calm, even. Said I was there to grab personal documents. The boyfriend laughed, actually laughed, then leaned against the doorframe like the hallway belonged to royalty. Yeah, no. You don't live here. That sentence landed heavier than it should have. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I'd felt for months. Replacement had already happened. Not emotionally. Logistically. I asked where my wife was. The boyfriend smirked and stepped back inside, leaving the door half open on purpose. I saw new furniture. Different art. Shoes by the wall that didn't belong to me. A life rearranged fast. My wife appeared then, phone already in hand, eyes cold in a way marriage counseling never prepared me for. No apology. No shock. Just annoyance. This isn't a good time, my wife said. I reminded my wife that my name was still on mail coming here. That important paperwork was inside. That the conversation didn't need to get ugly. That's when the phone call happened. The boyfriend didn't even step away. Just said, yeah, there's some guy here refusing to leave. Says he owns the place. That word, owns, was said like a joke. The hallway filled with blue and red light less than 10 minutes later. Neighbors peeked. Doors cracked. Judgments formed fast. I stood still, hands visible, posture relaxed. No panic. No raised voice. The officer asked what was going on. The boyfriend spoke first, confident. Explained how an ex was causing a disturbance. Claimed fear. Claimed harassment. Claimed the condo belonged to the couple now. The officer turned to me. Asked if there was proof of residence. I said no. Not because proof didn't exist. Because proof didn't need to be shown yet. The officer asked if my name was on the lease. I said no again. That part was true. The officer explained that without proof, removal was required. Asked if I would leave peacefully. I looked straight at my wife. Not angry. Not pleading. Just curious. My wife didn't meet my eyes. So I nodded. I walked away with dignity while whispers followed. Heard the door close behind me. Heard the deadbolt turn. Heard laughter echo faintly through concrete. The ride home was quiet. No music. No shaking hands. Just clarity. That condo wasn't rented. That condo was owned. Not jointly. Not recently. Fully. By me. 5 years earlier, long before marriage problems, long before the boyfriend existed, I'd bought the condo through a holding company tied to my consulting business. Asset protection. Tax efficiency. Something an advisor insisted on. My wife knew I worked in finance. My wife never asked details. My wife never cared, as long as the lifestyle stayed comfortable. After separation, I stopped paying attention. Let utilities keep running. Let assumptions grow. Let entitlement bloom unchecked. And now police had been called on the actual owner. That night, I didn't sleep. I logged into systems I hadn't touched in months. Reviewed documents. Deeds. Trust filings. Property records. Everything clean. Everything untouched. No transfer. No permission granted. No lease signed. Which meant something else. The boyfriend wasn't just arrogant. The boyfriend was squatting. And my wife knew it. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I went to the county records office instead. Printed certified copies. Requested transaction histories. Pulled timestamps that showed ownership going back years. Then I called an attorney. Not emotional. Not angry. Surgical. I explained everything. The attorney listened quietly, then said one sentence that shifted the ground under everything. Unauthorized occupancy combined with misrepresentation gives leverage most people never see coming. I asked what the next step was. The attorney smiled through the phone. Let them get comfortable. So I did. For 2 weeks, I said nothing. Didn't text. Didn't email. Didn't show up again. Let grocery deliveries continue. Let friends visit. Let social media show a life built on my asset. Behind the scenes, locks were scheduled for change. Notices drafted. Accounts flagged. Surveillance requests prepared. Then something unexpected happened. My wife called. Not angry. Not defensive. Sweet. Asked if we could talk like adults. Mentioned maybe working things out. Mentioned how stressful everything had been. Mentioned how the boyfriend was just a phase. I listened. Said nothing about ownership. Said nothing about documents. Just agreed to meet. At the condo. The same one I'd been escorted away from. That evening, I walked into the lobby with a folder under my arm and calm in my chest. The concierge recognized me this time. Said my name correctly. Held the elevator. When the door opened upstairs, my wife smiled. The boyfriend didn't. The boyfriend looked confused. Uncomfortable. Like something felt off but couldn't be named. I stepped inside without asking. No one stopped me. When the elevator doors closed behind me, the sound felt final, like a vault ceiling. The condo looked almost familiar and completely foreign at the same time. Furniture had been rearranged. New throw pillows, expensive but soulless. A framed print hung crooked on the wall where wedding photos once lived. Even the air felt rehearsed. The wife gestured toward the couch like a host welcoming a guest, not a husband returning to property personally paid for. The boyfriend stood near the kitchen island, arms crossed, jaw tight. No greeting came from that side of the room. I placed the folder on the coffee table but didn't open it. The wife started talking immediately. Apologies wrapped in excuses. Stress. Confusion. A need for space. Words delivered smoothly, like lines practiced in front of a mirror. Every sentence avoided responsibility and aimed instead at emotional fog. I listened. Nodded once or twice. Said nothing. The boyfriend finally broke. So what's this about? The boyfriend asked. Showing up uninvited again? I smiled, small and calm. I was invited. The wife stiffened. I texted earlier, I continued. The wife said talking like adults sounded reasonable. The boyfriend scoffed and turned to the wife. This is what I meant. This is manipulation. That word again. Funny how quickly labels appear when control feels threatened. I opened the folder slowly. Not dramatically. Just enough to let paper speak instead of emotion. The first document slid onto the table. A certified copy of the deed. The boyfriend leaned forward, squinted, then laughed. That doesn't mean anything. Anyone can print stuff. I slid the second document forward. County seal embossed. Ownership history. Date stamps. Silence followed. The wife reached for the papers. Hands shook just enough to notice. I scanned the page, then scanned again slower, like hoping words would rearrange themselves. That's not, the wife started. That is, I replied calmly. The boyfriend stepped closer. This place is under a company. That's not your name. I nodded. Correct. The company is owned by me. Formed years before marriage. Asset protection. The boyfriend looked to the wife. The wife didn't look back. The condo felt smaller suddenly. Walls closer. Air heavier. The boyfriend straightened up, confidence cracking at the edges. So what, you're saying you can just kick people out? I didn't answer right away. I let the question sit. I'm saying occupancy was never granted. I'm saying the police were called on the legal owner. I'm saying misrepresentation happened knowingly. The wife sat down hard. The boyfriend laughed again, but this time it sounded thin. You're bluffing. You would have said something before. I leaned back. Silence isn't a bluff. Silence is patience. The wife finally spoke, voice sharp now. Why do this? Why embarrass everyone? Everyone? I asked. Or just the people who assumed ownership without asking? The boyfriend grabbed the folder and flipped through aggressively. Every page deepened the frown. No loopholes. No shared claim. No wiggle room. What do you want? The wife asked quietly. That question mattered more than anything else in the room. I want access to personal property, I said. I want acknowledgement that police involvement was unjustified. And I want occupancy to end. The boyfriend exploded then. Raised voice. Accusations. Threats about lawyers and harassment claims and how this would look to friends. I let the noise pass like weather. When the boyfriend stopped, breathing hard, I spoke again. A formal notice has already been prepared. The wife's head snapped up. Already? I nodded. Locks are scheduled to change. Utilities will transfer back. Unauthorized residents will have 72 hours to vacate. The boyfriend pointed. You can't just do that. I already did. The room went quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. A quiet that meant options were disappearing. The wife stood up suddenly. You planned this? Yes. You wanted to humiliate? No. I wanted clarity. The boyfriend grabbed a jacket from the chair. This isn't over. I looked directly at that face. Actually, this part is. The boyfriend stormed out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle a frame. Only 2 people remained now. History sat heavy between us. The wife stared at the floor. You could have warned. I did, I said. Years ago. When respect started slipping. Tears appeared. Not enough to fall. Just enough to signal regret too late. I didn't think you'd do anything, the wife whispered. That's the problem. I stood, gathered the folder, and walked toward the bedroom. The wife didn't follow. Packing personal documents didn't take long. Old watch. Passport. Birth certificate. Items that shouldn't have been hostage in the first place. On the way out, I paused at the door. The police report was filed under false pretenses, I said. That's documented. The wife looked up, panic flashing. Are you pressing charges? I considered the question. Not today. The door closed behind me without drama. Over the next 2 days, silence screamed louder than any argument. Messages came in waves. First from the wife. Apologies. Bargaining. Then from the boyfriend. Anger. Threats. Then silence again. On the 3rd day, movers arrived. I didn't attend. Cameras did. Boxes left. Furniture followed. The boyfriend's car disappeared from the parking spot. By sunset, the condo stood empty. Locks were changed. Access revoked. I walked through that space alone that night. Turned on lights. Opened windows. Let air move freely again. No laughter. No accusations. Just echoes. That's when something unexpected happened. A call came from a number not saved. It was the same officer from before. The voice sounded different now. Respectful. Just calling to close a loop, the officer said. Ownership verified. Report updated. I thanked the officer and ended the call. Standing there, looking out over the city, I realized something important. This was never about property. This was about being erased quietly. And refusing to let that happen. Because once assumptions fall apart, truth doesn't need to shout. And the next step wasn't finished yet. The first night back inside the condo felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately explain. Not bad. Just unfamiliar. Like walking into a place that had been lived in by strangers who thought they owned the silence. I didn't unpack. I didn't cook. I didn't even sit down. I walked. Room to room. Corner to corner. Every step confirmed what I already knew but hadn't wanted to admit before. Nothing in that condo had ever been accidental. The rearranged furniture. The missing documents. The way certain drawers had been organized without asking. It hadn't been chaos. It had been preparation. I stopped in the hallway. The smoke detector blinked. Once. Then again. Not the normal low battery pulse. This was deliberate. Rhythmic. Almost subtle enough to ignore. Almost. I reached for a chair and stood on it slowly. Unscrewed the plastic casing. Inside wasn't a battery issue. Inside was a camera. Small. Clean. New. Pointed straight down the hallway toward the bedroom. I didn't react. Didn't curse. Didn't pull it out in anger. I smiled. Then I checked the living room. Behind a decorative plant sat another one. Hidden well. A black lens blended into fake leaves. Then the kitchen. Then the guest bathroom. 4 total. I laid them out on the counter in a straight line, like evidence on a table. Because that's what they were. Surveillance. Not for safety. For control. The wife had talked about concern. About well-being. About fear. Concern doesn't watch someone sleep. Control does. I took photos. Close-ups. Serial numbers. Placement angles. Timestamps. Then I waited. The front door opened just after 9. The wife stepped inside first, keys jingling. Stopped cold when eyes landed on the counter. The boyfriend followed. One look and the face drained of color. Nobody spoke. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Come. Want to explain? I asked. The wife recovered first. Those are for safety. Explain the bedroom angle. Silence. The boyfriend shifted. People fall. Accidents happen. People also lie, I replied. The wife's voice sharpened. You're overreacting. No, I said quietly. I'm documenting. That word changed the room. The boyfriend stepped forward. You can't record us without consent. I tilted my head. These were on property owned by me. Installed without consent. Streaming to a device not registered to me. The wife swallowed. I continued. That's illegal. In more than one way. The boyfriend opened mouth. Closed it. You should have asked, the wife said weakly. You should have never installed them. The silence that followed was heavy. The kind that presses down when people realize the power balance has shifted and there's no way to push it back. I didn't threaten. Didn't raise my voice. I picked up one of the cameras and set it gently in front of the wife. This ends now, I said. Not tomorrow. Not later. Now. The boyfriend laughed once. A nervous, brittle sound. You think this scares us? No, I said. I think this clarifies things. That night, both left again. This time, no slamming doors. No yelling. Just retreat. The next morning, I met with an attorney. Not the one used during the marriage. A different one. Quiet office. Clean desk. Sharp eyes. I laid everything out. Deed. Corporate ownership. Police report. Camera photos. Bank irregularities I'd started noticing weeks ago but hadn't wanted to believe. The attorney didn't interrupt. When everything was on the table, the attorney leaned back and said one sentence. This wasn't just infidelity. This was strategy. That word landed hard. Strategy. I nodded slowly. Unauthorized surveillance. Misrepresentation to law enforcement. Attempted exclusion of owner. Possible financial misconduct. Potential fraud if shared accounts were altered without authorization. Each phrase peeled another layer off the illusion I'd lived in. You can proceed in several ways, the attorney said. Civil, criminal. Or containment. Containment? I asked. The attorney smiled faintly. Protect assets. Cut access. Let consequences unfold without confrontation. I chose containment. By the time the wife realized what was happening, accounts were frozen. Shared permissions revoked. Utilities reassigned. Condo access restricted. Messages flooded in. First emotional. Then angry. Then desperate. The boyfriend accused me of abuse. The wife accused me of betrayal. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched patterns emerge. Emails sent too fast. Messages contradicting each other. Panic leaking through words that used to sound confident. One message stood out. A forwarded email from a realtor. Subject line, timeline confirmation. The condo address was listed. Planned showings. Projected sale. Expected payout. My name nowhere. That was the moment clarity locked in. They hadn't just assumed ownership. They'd planned profit. I forwarded everything to the attorney. The response came back 5 minutes later. Now we escalate. Not with shouting. With facts. Cease and desist letters went out. The listing vanished within hours. The realtor called personally to apologize after learning the truth. Another call followed. This one from a bank fraud department. Turns out a line of credit application had been submitted using corporate details, but signed electronically from an IP address not associated with me. Guess whose? I didn't press charges immediately. I let the investigation breathe. Let pressure build quietly. Then came the knock. Not the wife. Not the boyfriend. Police. Different officers this time. Older. Slower. Careful. They asked questions. I answered calmly. Provided documentation. Provided access. They left with copies. The wife called that night. Voice shaking. No accusations left. Only fear. Why are you doing this? The wife asked. I paused. Because being silent almost cost everything. A week later, the boyfriend disappeared from the condo completely. Another week, the wife moved out. Another week, lawyers took over. I didn't attend mediation. I didn't need closure from conversation. I already had it from truth. The condo sat empty again. But this time, it felt clean. Not because people were gone. Because ownership was no longer questioned. I stood by the window one evening watching city lights flicker on and off. This hadn't been about winning. It had been about not losing quietly. And as the last notification from the bank came through, confirming the account freeze and investigation, I realized something else. The story wasn't finished. Because when plans unravel, the people who made them don't just walk away. They look for someone to blame. And next time, silence wouldn't protect them. The first thing that changed after the investigation started wasn't noise. It was behavior. Messages stopped coming directly. No more emotional calls. No dramatic accusations. Everything moved behind intermediaries, emails from attorneys, vague requests routed through third parties, silence padded with formality. That's how people act when they realize the ground beneath them isn't solid anymore. The condo stayed empty. I kept it that way on purpose. Every light off. No furniture replaced. No signs of life. Letting a place sit untouched does something powerful. It reminds everyone that ownership isn't about occupancy. It's about control. 2 weeks after the bank froze the accounts, the first legal letter arrived. Not an apology. A threat. The wife's attorney alleged financial coercion and emotional distress, framing the loss of access as abuse rather than consequence. It was well written. Carefully vague. Designed to provoke a reaction. I didn't react. I forwarded it to my attorney and went about my day. That silence forced escalation. Next came the boyfriend's move. A public one. A post appeared online. Not naming names. Just enough detail to imply wrongdoing. Phrases like controlling X, financial manipulation, and weaponizing assets floated around like smoke signals. Friends commented. Sympathy poured in. The story spread. That was expected. What wasn't expected was how fast it collapsed. Because while emotion travels quickly, documentation travels farther. My attorney responded not online, but formally. Defamation notice. Evidence attached. Screenshots. Timestamps. Recorded inconsistencies between statements made to police, banks, and third parties. The post vanished within hours. The account went private. The boyfriend stopped posting altogether. Then came the call I hadn't anticipated. From a detective. Not patrol. Not civil. Financial crimes. The voice was neutral. Professional. Some discrepancies came up during a routine review, the detective said. We'd like to clarify a few things. I clarified everything. The forged electronic signature. The attempted credit application. The surveillance devices. The misrepresentation of ownership. The police call under false claims. Silence followed on the other end. Then, thank you. That helps. A week later, a notice arrived confirming formal charges were being considered, not against me. Against the boyfriend. Identity misuse. Attempted financial fraud. Unauthorized surveillance. The wife wasn't named, yet. That's when the tone changed completely. The apology message came at midnight. Not from an attorney. Direct. Long. Emotional. Full of regret and revisionist memory. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't know about the applications. I felt pressured. I was scared. I read it once. Then archived it. Fear doesn't install cameras. Fear doesn't draft listings. Fear doesn't plan profit. Fear reacts. This had been proactive. The next development was quieter but more telling. Mail. Documents forwarded incorrectly. An envelope addressed to the condo arrived at my temporary address. Inside were finalized architectural plans. Not renovations. Subdivision. They'd planned to convert the condo into multiple rental units using the company structure, before ownership was ever transferred. The scale of it was sobering. This hadn't been impulse. It had been long-term extraction. I forwarded the plans to the attorney. The response was simple. This confirms intent. The investigation accelerated after that. The boyfriend's attorney reached out. Not to argue innocence. To negotiate. A plea. Reduce charges in exchange for restitution and admission. The wife's attorney followed. A separate letter. Requesting mediation. I declined both. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Some conversations only exist to rewrite history. I wasn't interested in a softer version of the truth. The final interaction happened unexpectedly. In person. At a grocery store. Late afternoon. Quiet aisle. I turned the corner and almost collided with the wife. The face looked different. Less sharp. More fragile. Eyes darted like someone expecting judgment from every angle. The wife froze. I nodded once. No anger. No satisfaction. Just acknowledgement. I didn't think you'd actually do anything, the wife said quietly. I know, I replied. That was it. No argument. No tears. Just truth. Weeks later, the condo was sold, but not the way planned. I sold it quietly. Privately. No listing. No spectacle. The proceeds went exactly where they were supposed to, from the beginning. Not into shared accounts. Not into promises. Into stability. The investigation concluded shortly after. Charges were filed. Names appeared on documents. Consequences attached to decisions. I didn't attend court. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. Because the real outcome had already happened. Control returned. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just permanently. The condo chapter closed. But something else opened. Because when people mistake patience for weakness, they don't just lose access. They lose credibility. And the silence they tried to bury someone under becomes the very thing that exposes them. By the time everything reached its final stage, life had slowed down in a way that felt unfamiliar but earned. The noise was gone. No late-night emails. No surprise letters. No sudden emergencies demanding attention. Just quiet mornings, steady routines, and the rare luxury of thinking without pressure. The investigation wrapped itself up without spectacle. Financial institutions finished audits. Digital records were archived. Statements were taken, verified, sealed. Once paperwork replaces emotion, outcomes stop being negotiable. The boyfriend faced consequences that couldn't be talked out of. Fraud leaves trails. False authority creates records. Surveillance without consent doesn't disappear just because intention gets rebranded as concern. Charges didn't arrive dramatically. Charges arrived methodically, one envelope at a time. The wife attempted distance once accountability became real. A relocation followed. New address. New phone number. New social circle. Reinvention only works when the past stays quiet. This past didn't. Every application asked questions. Every background check surfaced inconsistencies. Every professional reference required explanations that couldn't be trimmed down to a flattering version. Association matters, especially when financial misconduct enters official systems. Meanwhile, rebuilding didn't require revenge or celebration. Rebuilding required intention. The sale of the condo closed smoothly. The transaction was clean, verified, boring in the best way. Proceeds moved into accounts designed for separation and protection, not shared access. Control returned not as power over others, but as freedom from interference. The most unexpected moment came weeks later. A handwritten envelope arrived. No return address. Inside sat a single page, folded unevenly. The handwriting belonged to the wife. Not defensive. Not apologetic. Just tired. The message didn't ask for forgiveness. The message didn't demand understanding. The message admitted one thing only: underestimation. Silence was mistaken for compliance. Distance was mistaken for defeat. Calm was mistaken for confusion. Those assumptions carried consequences. The letter ended without a signature. I didn't respond. Not because closure was denied, but because closure had already happened. Life continued. Work stabilized. Sleep improved. Meals tasted better without tension in the room. Decisions stopped feeling like negotiations. Months later, a mutual acquaintance shared an update unintentionally. The boyfriend was gone from the picture entirely. Legal trouble changes relationship dynamics fast. Support evaporates when outcomes replace promises. The wife had moved again. Smaller place. Fewer comforts. No illusions about ownership or control. Just responsibility. There was no satisfaction in that knowledge. Only clarity. Because the real shift wasn't external. The real shift happened internally, the moment self-respect stopped waiting for permission. One evening, sitting alone with paperwork finally boxed away, I realized something simple but permanent. Nothing had been taken from me. Time was returned. Autonomy was restored. Boundaries became solid instead of theoretical. That condo was never the prize. The ability to walk away without chaos was. The story didn't end with shouting or spectacle. The story ended with choice, quiet, documented, irreversible choice. And that's the part most people never see coming. If this story made you think differently about trust, boundaries, or silence, leave a comment and share what stood out. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe and stay, there are more truths worth telling.